The town of Skidmore, Missouri, was a small, quiet farming community. For most of its history, it was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors. That changed in the summer of 1981. The central figure in this story is a man named Ken Rex McElroy. McElroy was a bully, a thief, and a violent predator. He was a large man, over 6 feet tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds, and he used his size to intimidate everyone in the town and the surrounding county. His criminal record was extensive, spanning over 2 decades. It included assault, arson, child molestation, rape, and theft. He was accused of burning down the houses of those who crossed him. He was known for stealing cattle and then brazenly butchering them in his own yard. He would walk into the local bar, order a drink, and then walk out without paying, daring the owner to say something. He would shoplift in broad daylight from the town's only grocery store, knowing that no one would stop him. He operated with a sense of complete impunity. He had been charged with crimes numerous times, but he always managed to evade serious punishment. He used a combination of fear, intimidation, and a network of family members and friends who would provide him with alibis. Witnesses against him had a habit of suddenly changing their stories or refusing to testify altogether. The legal system, it seemed, could not touch Ken McElroy. The final conflict began over a simple matter of debt. McElroy had a history with a 70-year-old grocer named Ernest Bo Bowenkamp. McElroy believed that Bowenkamp's daughter owed him money. On December 1st, 1980, McElroy confronted the old man inside the town's tavern. He accused Bowenkamp of spreading rumors about him. McElroy was drunk and aggressive. He shoved Bowenkamp and threatened to kill him. A few days later, on December 6th, McElroy's young wife, Trina, who had been under his control since she was very young, went into the grocery store. She tried to take a carton of cigarettes without paying, claiming it was to settle a supposed debt. Bo Bowenkamp's son, Romaine, who was working there that day, stopped her. This confrontation challenged McElroy's authority. That evening, as Bo Bowenkamp and his wife were driving home, McElroy caused their truck to veer off the road. He then pulled up beside them, raised a rifle, and fired a shot through the driver's side window. The bullet shattered the glass, but miraculously missed Bo. The Bowenkamps were terrified, but physically unharmed. This incident finally led to McElroy's arrest. He was charged with assault with intent to kill. The town held its breath. Maybe this time, something would stick. The trial was a circus of intimidation. McElroy and his family filled the courtroom. They stared down witnesses. They made threatening gestures. Despite this, in July of 1981, a jury found Ken Rex McElroy guilty of assault. The judge, who had previously clashed with McElroy, set his bond at a staggering $50,000 and scheduled sentencing for a later date. McElroy was furious. He was released after posting bond and he immediately returned to Skidmore. He began making threats openly. He said he would get even with the Bowenkamps. He said he would kill Bo Bowenkamp. He said he would burn down the house of the town's mayor. The entire town was paralyzed with fear. They had seen this before. They knew the legal process had failed to contain him before, and they were certain it would fail again. He would get a suspended sentence or a light prison term, and he would be back, angrier and more violent than ever. The morning of July 10th, 1981, was a breaking point. McElroy, with his young wife Trina by his side, drove his pickup truck into town. He went to the D&G Tavern, the social center of Skidmore. He sat at a table, drinking beer and eating potato chips as if he didn't have a care in the world. But his presence was a declaration of war. He was showing everyone that he was untouchable. Word began to spread through the small town. McElroy was in the bar. He was bragging. He was threatening people again. The townspeople had reached their limit. One by one, they began to gather. They came from their farms, their shops, their homes. They gathered in the street outside the D&G Tavern. They did not come with a plan. They came out of a shared, desperate fear. This was not a mob in the traditional sense. It was a gathering of terrified, cornered people. There were between 30 and 60 people standing in that street. They were discussing what to do. How could they protect themselves? How could they protect their families from this man who the law refused to stop? Inside the bar, McElroy was informed that a crowd was gathering outside. He reportedly laughed it off. He finished his beer, and around noon, he and Trina stood up to leave. They walked out of the bar and got into McElroy's pickup truck, which was parked right out front. McElroy was in the driver's seat. Trina was in the passenger seat. The crowd watched in silence. McElroy started the engine. At that moment, the sound of gunshots shattered the afternoon air. Multiple shots were fired from multiple directions. The driver's side window of the pickup truck exploded. Ken McElroy was hit at least twice, in the head and the neck. He slumped over the steering wheel, dead. Trina, sitting next to him, was unharmed. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. In the immediate, stunned silence that followed, no one moved. Then, the crowd began to disperse. People simply turned and walked away. They got into their cars and trucks and drove home. They went back to their farms, their shops, their lives. They left Trina McElroy sitting in the passenger seat of the truck next to the bloody corpse of her husband. Law enforcement arrived on the scene. They found McElroy dead. They began an investigation into a murder that had been committed in broad daylight in the middle of a small town, in front of at least 36 witnesses. And this is where the story takes its most chilling and unforgettable turn. The investigation went nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. The sheriff and his deputies questioned dozens of people. They knew who was there. They had a list of every person in that crowd, but every single person they interviewed told the same story. They saw nothing. They heard nothing. They knew nothing. When asked what happened, they all claimed they had their heads turned. They were looking at the ground. They didn't see who fired the shots. Trina McElroy was there, and even her testimony was of little help. She was traumatized, and, some suggested, still afraid of McElroy's associates. The investigation hit a solid, impenetrable wall of silence. There was physical evidence. Bullet casings from different guns were found at the scene, indicating more than one shooter. But without a single witness willing to point a finger, the case was impossible to prosecute. The event became known as the Skidmore bullying, or the shooting in Skidmore. It was a vigilante killing, but one born not from a desire for justice, but from a primal instinct for survival. The town had collectively decided that the only way to stop the monster was to kill it, and then they collectively decided to forget it ever happened. To this day, not a single person has ever been charged in connection with the murder of Ken Rex McElroy. The case remains officially open, but it is, for all intents and purposes, cold. The story doesn't have a satisfying resolution. There is no hero. There is no justice in the traditional sense. There is only a dead bully and a town full of people who carried a terrible secret to their graves. The chilling end is not the violence of the shooting itself, but the absolute, unbreakable silence that followed. It was a silence that spoke of a fear so deep that it transcended the law. It was a silence that proved, in the end, that Ken McElroy was wrong. He was not untouchable. The town finally found a way to touch him, and in doing so, they enacted a form of justice that was as final as it was illegal. The truth of who pulled the triggers that day died with the people in that crowd. The story of Skidmore, Missouri, serves as a dark reminder of what can happen when a community feels utterly abandoned by the legal system designed to protect it. It is a story with no good guys, only victims who finally fought back in the most extreme way imaginable and then vanished behind a curtain of silence that has never been lifted.